You've heard no controversial perspectives today, so I'm not going to give you any more controversy at the end of the day. We'll have a little bit of fun. I'm not going to go into a boring book about institutional reform. What I would say at the beginning is that I kind of disagree with pretty much everything that Niall said about what's going on in the world, especially poorer countries, that I don't think that downloading much of what the West What got the West to grow is what is working in Liberia or Sierra Leone or anywhere else. And actually, I think that in many cases, it's creating a lot of mayhem. I find that a lot of the reforms that are designed to download those killer apps are reforms that look fabulous in many countries and that over 5 years or 10 years or 15 years are shown to produce very little functional result. They are signals that we measure and we like to celebrate, but they don't get us where we need to get to. The doing business indicators are a fine example. The doing business indicators tend to measure what the law says countries do, but what's more interesting is if you look at the enterprise surveys, and the enterprise surveys show you that countries don't do anything like that whatsoever. In many countries, the doing business indicators will show that it takes 20 days to get a permit, and what we find in the enterprise surveys is that for 10% of the countries it doesn't take 1 day, and for 50% of the countries it takes 2,000 days. So the question is, what do the business indicators tell us? Why do people pay so much attention to them? Why do they do reforms designed to address them? Now, the interesting thing, even more with doing business indicators, is that some of the worst performing countries in the world are your country, Brazil. Another one is called India, and another one is called China. Another one is called South Africa, and I think we call these the BRICS, right? And these are countries that have seen a significant amount of growth, and a lot of it has been in the private sector, and they don't pay that much attention to the doing business indicators, and they don't do well on the doing business indicators. The same can be said for some of the other governance indicators as well, where these countries have said, they don't really have much relevance for what we need to do. It's interesting that the countries that do well on them are countries like Liberia, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan, Iraq, and a bunch of other basket cases that are terribly dependent on the international community that define these indicators, that measure these indicators, and that tie their loans to the indicators. Now I'll start with my talk. Imagine that you are a hiker and you're stuck in the Sahara Desert. Imagine that you need water to survive within the day and you have none. You're 2-day walk away from an oasis and your ankle is sprained. We're talking about Liberia, right? Do you, A, dig for water, B, crawl, C, lie down and accept certain death, or D, find a camel to ride to an oasis? Anyone? Now imagine. What if I said none of the above? What if I said you need a good hippo? And I'm from South Africa, and some people say, what is a hippo? A hippopotamus. Have you ever seen a hippopotamus anywhere where it's not in water? You lack water. Hippos are all about water. You need a good hippo. And come on, I'll get you one. Now, would you be at all surprised if the hippo turned up to take all the water that you may still have, if it helped you find no new water, if it looked impressive but it was pretty useless, and if it died maybe even before you did? Sounds like a ridiculous idea, right? Well, I see this in development all the time, where I see development organizations selling developing countries hippos that look incredibly impressive. And for a period of time, you have ministers of finance trotting all over the world to discuss the latest thing that they managed to pull off, and everyone's saying, but you're in Liberia, how did you introduce property rights? Well, we don't have any sitting justices, but we managed to do it. Well done, that's absolutely incredible. After a few years, you find that the property rights don't work, and the problems that the Minister of Finance started dealing with at the beginning haven't been addressed either. Now, where I came up with this idea of hippos in the Sahara was in a meeting with the Minister of Finance in Mozambique, which is the 6th poorest nation in the world. It is a nation that has a public sector financial management information system called an FMIS. I live in a very boring world where I'm very interested in getting into the bowels of governance systems, internal control, internal audit. And I had heard that in Mozambique they had this fabulous system. and that the whole country was wired, and there was this electronic basis for doing all of the reporting, all of the management, all of the control, all of the budgeting, and I just had to see this. So when I got involved, the minister said, I'm really glad that you're here. Now he's speaking in Portuguese and I'm speaking in English and we're trying to communicate. He said, I'm really glad that you're here because I'd like a third opinion on kind of what's going on. You know, I have my opinion, the World Bank has their opinion, the fund loves this, and they're giving me huge amounts of money for this. But could you just go out and have a look, you know, what's going on? So I've done this in a few places, and I went out to a local village. And I said to the local head of the budget department, could I please see your system? And he said, fantastic, great. And all the kids come out behind the car. If anyone's been in a village in an African country, you'd know what I'm talking about. The kids running behind the car. I go into the room. He closes the door. The kids all come to the window where I'm going to be, right? And you walk in, and there's a huge kind of blanket on top of the computer. And they take the blanket off, and the kids are there. And I look out, and I could see there's a guy cranking up a manual generator outside. And as he cranks it up, the computer starts to come to life, and you start to see the kind of connecting modem-y device in the corner start to work. And the kid's eyes all kind of light up. And he starts to show me how this works. I said, wow, this is really amazing. And he said, no, it's truly incredible. And I said to him, the question that I have is, given that you're managing finances all the time and you have to crank this up, how do you use this to manage your public finances? He said, no, we don't use it to manage our public finances. He said, once a month, we put all the numbers into the system. So I said to him, well, then how do you manage your finances? He says, no, we do it on paper. Now, the law says that they can't do it on paper because they're meant to do it on the in this financial management system, right? Now, what this means is it means that they no longer have any internal controls in the country of Mozambique, because the internal controls are meant to be within the system, right? And the system is being used as a reporting device, not as a financial management device. So I had this conversation with the Minister of Finance when I went back, and I said, you know, you have like real concern here, real cause for concern, because you have problems and you don't even know what they are. I have no idea what the arrears are in this country because there's no way to measure them anymore because you've kind of accepted the system that you just can't manage. And he didn't know what I was saying. And I said to him, listen, you're in the Sahara Desert. You have no electricity. You have very, very limited connectivity. You have very little capacity. And you basically accepted a hippopotamus that requires a lot of all of those things to solve your problem. And the hippo is going to die. And then he said to me, no, 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 I'm a hippo keeper. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you don't know what I've got for that system. He said, the World Bank love me. The IMF stick with me. We've got loans. I travel all around the world with that system. The problem, of course, is that it doesn't necessarily solve the problems associated with the Ministry of Finance. Now, I could tell you stories in the book, and the book is, I think, fairly dry. But someone in the World Bank said, this is a hilarious story, a hilarious book, because it's full of stories like this about countries that created procurement systems that don't work, but they look fabulous. My best example is the country in the world that has the best anti-corruption laws in the world. Anybody have an idea who it is? New Zealand? No, no. Ghana? No, it's not Ghana. Anybody? Afghanistan? No, but close though. Afghanistan, very good. No, Russia. Russia doesn't pretend. North Korea. We don't measure North Korea. The answer is Uganda. Now, anybody who knows Uganda might be as surprised because Uganda has major corruption crises every 4 to 5 years. At the moment, it's in the middle of a very, very serious corruption crisis that caused every single development partner to pull their money out of the country last year. That's a big crisis, right? They have the best laws in the world. Every time they have a crisis, their response is to strengthen the laws that they have. Last time, they introduced a whistleblower law and a code of ethics. Okay? 4 years later, the Prime Minister's office was found to have stolen all the money associated with HIV medication. Now, this is like hippos in the Sahara. It's these impressive-looking interventions that the donor community has said, this is how you govern a country, but they don't work. And they don't work often because they don't have the capacity, or you don't have the political system to allow it to happen, or maybe we had the discussion about you don't have the culture. their governance system that would actually solve your problems would look very different than those examples. Now, in the work in the book and the work that I've been doing, it can't all be negative, right? And there's some reforms that are successful and some countries that look pretty good. An example is Rwanda. But Rwanda is a very uncomfortable place for the donors right now because the Rwandan government is kind of this top-down government with an autocratic president who promises to leave in a couple of years' time, but I don't think anyone really believes that that's going to happen. But when I go into Rwanda, I find that they have some really interesting things that they do. One of them is they have a fully blown results management system in government. Now, anybody who comes from America would tell me, or if you knew anything about the system here, America says it has a results-based system in government, but it doesn't really, because it's a very, very difficult thing to pull off. Now, Rwanda genuinely has one. What it looks like is they have meetings, and the president or the prime minister attend the meetings, and mayors come and they tell the president or the prime minister what they did in the last year, and the president or the prime minister essentially says to them, give me evidence. So if they say, well, we built a school, he'll say, I want pictures. And they'll show pictures. And then he'll say, can you bring some students, please? And then he'll ask the students, what do you do in that school? Are there any teachers in that school? And then he'll say to them, can you sing me a song? And did you learn that song in your school? And I've been in these meetings. And now and again, you'll get a mayor who can't produce the students. And the president will intervene and say, we need a new mayor over here. And it's extremely controlling and it's extremely rigid. And it's a place where I'm seeing local governments producing services that you don't see in any other place. Now, the donors don't really know what to do about this because it's kind of a model that looks a bit weird. So when I went in there, I went to find out where it came from. And I found out that after the genocide, the Rwandans decided that they needed to empower local governments to provide local services because that was one of the reasons why things fell apart in the country. But when the donors came in and they said, this is what a decentralization system looks like, and you need decentralization, and the president said, no, I have no desire to decentralize anything. Okay, I'm going to be in control of this. So over about 15 years, they experimented with a range of things to move money to the local regions. And at one point in time, they said, well, how do we make people performance-based? And someone said, well, 100 years ago, the king had a good system, whereby he would invite all of the regional heads once a year to meet with him, and they would have a calabash full of beer. And they would put it in front of the person, and they would have the person report. And if the king was happy with you, you got to drink the beer, and then you got to pass on. And if you didn't, you just had to pass it on. So there was public shaming involved and public reward, and they said, that sounds fantastic. And it's called the imihigo. And so they said, the best thing about it is Rwandan. The people here will understand this. This comes from who we are, and that's what they have now. Okay? Very, very different from results-based management in Uganda, which Uganda has, by the way. A very, very good system on paper. Now, when I look at the instances of reforms that seem to yield more functional states, I see a few things. One thing is that they come when governments face problems that they actually have to deal with. It's not about signaling, it's not about pretending, and it's not about doing well on indicator sets, and it's not about getting loans. It's about doing things that the business community or that the democratic society are saying you need to do. There's a burning platform. The second thing is that there's no jump towards some external best practice solution, but there's rather a process, like Banny was working with you guys, of kind of creative innovation. Trying things out, finding what works, building capacity to pull the thing off as you move along, and building the political will for what you're trying to do. And it involves many, many agents, and most of them are local. The interesting thing that I found is that the international community played a very specific and important role, but it was pretty much providing money and nothing more. And providing money when it was needed, and often providing money in very small amounts. It was about fostering innovation in the local context rather than telling people what to do. So, finally, creating relevant solutions. Camels in the Sahara rather than hippos. So I carry on working in Mozambique. And the minister says to me, what do we want to do? And I said, the best thing about my meetings out in the sticks were not the moments when they showed me the computer. It was when they showed me the paper. It was when the guys who aren't meant to be using paper showed me the detail with which they are accounting for the things in the field. You have people out there who know how to do their jobs. They know how to do them in Mozambique, and they care about doing them well. What you should be doing is getting those people and saying, how do we do this? How do we do it in Mozambique? How do we do it given our capacity constraints? And you're going to end up with a paper-based system that everyone says is antiquated, that everyone says you could do much better with, but that you could actually pull off and that does what you need. Looks like a camel. And as I say in there, camels function spectacularly in the desert, but they don't look that good and they smell worse. But that is what functional governance is going to look like in most of the developing countries we're talking about. And until we accept that that's what it's going to look like, and it's going to be something we have to sometimes kind of hold our noses at, I think we're going to be dealing with a lot of governments that look very good but don't function very effectively. So this is what my book is about. And the last kind of serious message. So the book was actually meant to be titled Hippos in the Sahara, but it's an academic press, so the editor turned it into The Limits of Institutional Reform in Development instead. But the important academic message is this. If our goal is seriously to foster developing countries that can function, I think we need to be very serious about whether we think that the doing business indicators are actually things that they can do or need to do. Whether we think that a lot of the models of democratic governance that we force on countries are things that, again, they either need or can do. And we need to think about what is going to be fitted to those countries that they can do, that they need to do, and that will make them function as they need for growth and development in the future.